Excellent. Oh, the light is blinding up here. How is everyone doing today? You survived from the party last night? No? Yes? Excellent. So actually really excited for the panel today. We had a really engaging conversation on Monday evening to discuss what we will be discussing. So what we'll do is I want this to be a bit educational to start with. So I'm going to throw a question to each panelist individually to begin with. They may or may not introduce themselves, entirely up to them. So I'll start off, Stuart, with you.
Okay. I'm Stuart Haber. I'm here as Chief Cryptographic Officer. That's a mouthful of a name, but I'm the cryptographic advisor to a startup called SureMark Digital. But I should say to, as part of my introduction, that some decades back, along with my partner in crime, Scott Stornetto, we designed and deployed the world's first blockchain, running what you think of as Satoshi's data structure was in fact ours, commercially deployed as experimental code since fall of 1991, a little before Bitcoin. And we are thinking of, we are applying basic principles of decentralization and vetted cryptographic tools to some of the problems of digital identity.
And I think before we dive into the AI aspect, it's always important to understand more around the human-centric first. So in a world of deepfakes, suppose I hear a convincing audio clip of you making a statement. As a normal person, what does it actually mean to prove that voice came from you?
Well, in fact, you can, one way of addressing the question is not by wondering, not by analyzing the video that you're hypothetically asking me about, but if it's a video that I want to publicly assert to or say something about, I can digitally sign using an old-fashioned digital signatures the video or the video along with my comments, and anybody can verify that.
So it's fair to say your work is about making claims auditable over time. Who said what, when, and where? I can't hear. Oh, apologies. It's fair to say your work is about making claims auditable over time so we can check who said what and when. If I were to summarize what you were saying.
Well, auditing of digital assertions was in fact the purpose of the original blockchain. That is, we were not trying to invent electronic money. We were trying to enable verification of the integrity of digital records of all sorts. And this is the current example.
Interesting. I think maybe, Chi, coming over to you. Agent passports create programmable identity for autonomous agents. How do you handle the authorization boundaries when agents transact on behalf of humans or even other agents?
Hello, everyone. This is Chi. Maybe I'll do a very quick intro. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Kite. So Kite is actually building the what we call next generation payment infrastructure for agentic internet. So basically the thesis is based on there's going to be tons of agents running on internet on behalf of businesses and human individuals. And in order for the agent to really be able to transact and even pay for services, we think there's a need to be a native infrastructure for that, including a unified stack from identity, governance to payments. And in this case, Kite launched recently a mainnet layer 1 blockchain, plus a Kite passport, we call it, and that is what Mohamed mentioned, what the agent passport is for. And that is essentially, think about a interface where you can use that to command an agent to do work for you, including transacting mining transaction. So in this case, how do we make it work? A lot of times people think it's just simply to make agent have the authorization to do something. It's actually way more than that, because in the future of agentic collaboration, it's actually about the chain of delegations matters here. So a very simple example you can think of is you ask your OpenAI ChatGPT to buy something on Amazon for you. And in this case, actually, it already involves 3 steps. One is from human principle. What do you usually prefer as a human to purchase something? For example, like you always want to purchase a sneaker, a pair of sneakers from Nike. That's the brand you want, and it's below, let's say, $300 is usually your budget. And then it's the agent itself. And in this case, you're using ChatGPT, not Anthropic, Cloud Code, or some other agent. And then the last thing is, then how do you assign this task, this purchase session, to, let's say, the purchase requirement to Amazon? So in this case, it's actually the delegation, the chain of delegation from human to agent to that session. And in this case, how do we make it work is essentially we have to verify multiple steps. We have to verify, is the agent coming from this human principle? And then with that human principle, usually you say, oh, because you make, let's say, 10K per month, so you don't want to spend your more than 2,000 in grocery per month. So that's the very first step. And in this case, that's the human principle budget or permission. And then the second step is the agent's permission. And you're probably going to use more than just the ChatGPT as one agent that do everything. Because moving forward, you're probably going to have multiple agents to do different things. Some of them are helping you to purchase grocery. Some of them will help you to order, flights. Some of them will even, like, if you are a developer, you probably have multiple coding agents that will do app development and everything. So then how do you have the permission on each of the agents that will inherit the universal delegation from that human principle? And then within each of the agents, you probably have multiple tasks, workflow that the agent needs to do. So within each of the workflow, how do you delegate the session permission in that process? So that's essentially is how do we design the passport.
Super fascinating. Evin, over to you. Your work on ZK identity really focuses on privacy-preserving proof of personhood. Wow, that was a mouthful. How does this framework extend to AI agents?
Certainly. So for a little bit of background context, thank you guys so much for being here. My name is Evin McMullen. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Billions Network. The ticker is BILL, and we are here on a mission to save the internet in the age of AI, where more than half of our online and on-chain transactions come from unidentified, unaccountable bots. So when we talk about the concept of proof of personhood, this is especially important online, where we are now in the minority of citizens, eclipsed by non-human actors like AI agents. I find the phrase privacy preserving to be kind of funny in some ways, because, like, what's the alternative? Over-disclosure, doxing, and relentless exposure of data when unnecessary, So at Billions Network, we ascribe to the principle of minimum disclosure, meaning the data should be shared when necessary for constrained use and intentional purposes, not sprayed generally in public for indiscriminate future use and over-disclosure. But when we talk about the concept of identity in the agentic world, our team a little over a year ago has popularized a term that you may know, KYA, Know Your Agent. At Billions Network, we care about the ABCs: know your agent, know your customer, know your business, know your customer. We make it easy for the traits that you as a human being have to be proven to apps and services without revealing your underlying data. So, for example, proving that you're over the age of 18 without revealing your date of birth. So that's kind of the heart of our tech stack. We support the world's most popular ZK libraries on Earth, more than 9,000 forks supporting organizations like HSBC, TikTok. But the other side of that is our agentic capabilities. How can your agent prove it's acting on behalf of you? Or how do I ask your agent, who's your daddy? Right now, there is no way to prove the association between a business or organization and their agents. My agent can't tell that it's actually communicating with Pierre's agent. And so it is that linkage of agent identity back to the organization or person who deployed it, who controls it, that we find vital. The concept of kind of verification of an agent, we see that as a function of the person or business that created it. And so therefore, the concept of KYA, or know your agent data, includes how was it trained, on what data, which model, what are the risk parameters, who controls this thing. And so rather than publicly disclosing all of that data, instead we make it easy for an agent to prove these traits if and when necessary. This is, of course, especially important in things like memes like agentic commerce, which we've heard a lot so far this week. But goes without saying, how do I pay an agent if I don't know who I am paying? And so that's why more than 95% of generative AI pilots in business today have no impact on P&L. We are engaging in innovation theater, but the world of agentic development is bottlenecked by the absence of agent identity. So particularly excited to delve into this topic and also to have awesome colleagues like Chief from Kite, who's working on some really amazing things in that space.
Super fascinating. Pierre, before we come to you, we've seen DAOs over the space and over years, and a lot of the DAOs have failed. Or open governance systems haven't really been where they should have been. What is missing when participants have voting rights but no portable reputation?
So I am Pierre. I am managing the technical engineers at Parity, and Parity is a company that is building most of Polkadot. So on Polkadot, we have something called OpenGov. It's a governance system, and people make proposal. Proposal can be a technical one. I want to change properties of the system, or it can be I want to do some marketing, or it can be I want money to run RPC nodes. So the original idea was something like a direct democracy. People make a proposal, and people vote. And if enough people vote for you, then your proposal is approved. So what did go wrong? So two things went very, very wrong. The first one is we underestimated the impact of politics. In a system like that, people team up together, vote for each other, and then they get some money. And the other thing we underestimated is the negative consequence of anonymity. So we wanted the system to be private. You don't need to tell who you are. You're a dot address, a hash. And with that hash, you can make any kind of proposal. But what happened is the same thing which is happening on all the forums online. Because people are anonymous, they think they can tell whatever they want. There is no accountability. And this has made OpenGov a lot less effective than what it was supposed to be. So out of it came this idea of personhood and how we want to make it work. So there are two key components we want in this personhood system. So the first one is we don't want a centralized database of people. So we don't want to collect the identity. And the reason we don't want that is because it didn't work super well in Web 2. We have 2 or 3 large companies with billions of profiles. And yes, it's convenient, and yes, it's very secure because they are very good at what they do, but they still know a lot more about you than they should, and we don't know what they're doing with the data. And lastly, I think a lot of them are losing data from time to time because there is a hack, and the bigger the database, the more likely you are to be a target. So no database is the answer. So the second part is accountability. How can you keep the privacy that we want to keep and still make people accountable? So typically, with personhood, we don't know who you are. But every time you vote, you cannot change who you are. You cannot fake you have 2 identities and make 3 proposals asking for 3 times the same thing. Or if you fail, 5 proposals and you never deliver, you cannot create a new address and ask again. So over time, you are building your own reputation. And this reputation is good because it's anonymous. The privacy is preserved. You cannot tell who it is, but the reputation is super hard to fake. And we think that will improve a lot how people behave online. They will get, for example, free services. because they are a person and not a bot or a company. Typically, Polkadot want to offer like free transaction to people that use a reasonable amount of transaction per month. But in order to do that, we need to be sure people cannot fake it. They cannot create 1,000 address. So the personhood we have is private. There is no database, and it builds your reputation over time. If we can do that and make it work like correctly next year, I will be a happy guy.
Thank you. That is a great answer. As a quick social experiment for the audience, how many of us remember a few years back when Meta acquired WhatsApp and we all worried about our data? Quick show of hands. How many of us which is fair, how many of us downloaded Telegram or Signal as an alternative? How many of us still use WhatsApp? Okay, excellent. So I think the next section, I think we've had a lot of education, and again, thank you for the panelists for being so articulate. Next is going to be an open round of questioning, and please jump in and feel free to answer. So the first question, what does it actually mean to verify identity when identity can be an autonomous AI agent rather than a human? Again, we've seen snippets of that answer in what each of you have said, but maybe can someone dive in a bit deeper in terms of what that actually means?
At Billions Network, we see an agent as acting on behalf of the entity that deployed it or controls it. And so from a technical perspective, the way that we handle it is pairwise decentralized identifiers. This means we use the public open standards gifted to us from on high from the World Wide Web Consortium, the good people who brought us the internet, so they know a thing or two about interoperability. And so we enable the permissioning control of agents to be associated then with that, that other party. Agents, of course, can beget other agents, but at the beginning of any such creation chain, there is a human or a business, but of course businesses are made up of humans. So we see that as the anchoring for identity for agents, and without it, we just have random key pairs floating around, and that doesn't really tell us a lot about context.
So maybe I'll add some on top of this. So one thing I want to clarify a bit when it comes to identities, people think identity is just about, like an agent or like a human or like some certain object. But in this case, as I introduced the Kite passport concept a little bit earlier, we think identity is really a few layers of identity adding together that really make agent verification work. Because in the end of the day, unless we're saying it's a cyberpunk future that there's no human exist, that's just the AI working with each other. Otherwise, in this case, there's still some human involved in that process, which means the verification of identity really come to us from like the human level to the agent level to particularly that task scope level. And for the first two levels, I think there are so many solutions that are trying to solve like human identity problems. I think Billions Networks has done something there, and of course, people will probably learn about Word and some other like even Web2, pure Web2 solutions are doing that. And then so I'm not going to go too deep to that. And then when it comes to agent identity, I think that's a very interesting topic because in the end of the day, the identity is all about how do you define this object, meaning that how do you define agent? Because agent technically is just a wrapper on top of a foundation model. So then in that case, if you're using ChatGPT, for example, and OpenAI released its GPT 5.5 instead of using like the past 4.5, are you still using the same agent? Or this agent has been, you have to change the identity because the brain has changed underlying. So in this case, there's many ways I think people right now are trying to define how agent identity looks like, and also how do you preserve the agent identity. So for us, we we are using the combination of this foundation model version plus like some of the logic that's add on top of the agent to define the agent. But there's some interesting solutions from Web2 companies like Microsoft. Recently, they launched an Agent ID solution, which is essentially tracking the sandbox. So they launched the agent in a sandbox environment, and then as long as it's in the sandbox, then they assign the same ID to that agent, and then they use that to give the permission to like an enterprise-graded access needs when it comes to some of their enterprise customers. So there's many ways to do that. But the point is, one thing I want to just add here is that ID is actually a very comprehensive solution, and it's go beyond just the one layer of ID. It has multiple layers here.
I have a different view like on the agent. So as a user, what I want is, so there are two parts. The first part is I want to control what they do. So that's the authorization part, which has nothing to do with who I am. But the other thing I want is I don't want Amazon, for example, to know I am buying 20 products. So every time I am doing a transaction for an agent to buy something, I want that from the point of view of Amazon, they see a different person every time. So typically, in our case, the system is generating a context, and you have an alias, which is generating a mix, if you want, between your personhood that they don't know and the context. So from the perspective of Amazon, they see 20 people buying things, but they don't know it's me. And that's important because if you think that in the future, like most of the transaction will be agent-driven, you don't want them to rebuild like who you are by looking at what the agents are doing. So you want to understand in one direction, in your direction, it's clear, and it needs to be very opaque in the reverse direction from the vendor to you, for example. So for me, like privacy needs to be built inside such that we don't go back in the same situation we are today where Amazon knows everything about you, because it's not good for us.
Sorry, actually, this is one more thing I want to add. I realize it's very interesting kind of I wouldn't say conflict of interest, but different interests from different companies. Amazon, particularly, for example, is very interested in getting humans or getting your behavior, including your agent behavior, which actually we run into the same question, even the same conversation with the Amazon, because when nowadays people can do Amazon shopping on Kite, and then we go to Amazon, we say like, let's form some partnership. The first question they will ask is, if a user will use Kite to purchase, let's say, a snack bar on Amazon, will we be able to trace back this transaction to the Amazon account this user belongs to us? And our answer is no. And they're like, there's a problem, because now we are losing the insights to the user behavior, and then that is like a big advantage for them. But on the other side, I realize some bigger, like some other big tech companies, particularly for some like ad companies, they don't actually want the user data that's being revealed to other like e-commerce platforms, including Amazon. So they actually can sell ads better to Amazon. But anyways, I just want to add, it's a very interesting discussion that, you know.
I think it's a great conversation. Stuart, anything to add from your end?
So, professionally, as part of SureMark, in fact, we are worried enough about human identity that we're not dealing with agents at all. There's enough of a problem of humans having their identity faked and of the consequences thereof. As a cryptographer, I can comment on others' architectural and technical choices, but I'll defer to my colleagues who are actually in the business of doing so.
It's fascinating. We haven't figured out proof of humanity, and yet we're trying to figure out proof of agentic nature, so to speak. It is fascinating. I mean, as a follow-up, I think it's in an agentic world where both humans and AI can hold reputation, what are the first norms or taboos we need to establish? And I feel this question isn't asked enough. And when I say taboos, this could be socially, it could be technically, but really around when it's not okay to track, score, or verify someone or something.
So I think certainly in the crypto space, our industry has been guilty of defaulting to on-chain. We certainly have had plenty of those campaigns, right? Bring the world on-chain summer. But we live in a society, there are rules, and all data is not appropriate to publicly broadcast to everyone on Earth and in space with an internet connection. And so as we think about, developing for, the agentic present and future, I think one such taboo or consideration that we should have is that doxing by default should be frowned upon. Defaulting to public data, similar to what Pierre was saying earlier, I think has long been a preference in the crypto space, right? Some might call it discoverability on chain. Others might call it over-disclosure of globally available data. And so I think public correlation of transactions should not be a default, similar to what Pierre was saying earlier. And I think defaulting to public data is particularly limiting in that what she was saying earlier, this actually violates some of the basic business principles of many operators. You've got to imagine, like, Goldman Sachs is not interested in publicly disclosing their order book, and neither is the agentic next version of many businesses interested in disclosing their trade secret, their business operations data, their list of clients. And this is sort of an opposite of best practices that we've seen on chain, but I think it's essential for our next steps in the agentic space.
Anyone else have an opinion?
Well, responding or to your point, the data can be auditable without being public. That is, using basic cryptographic tools, the data can be written to the blockchain, made verifiable, but only to parties that should see it.
A time-based privacy method encryption.
To give an idea how bad it is, there was a research study recently that identified people with like less than 10 transactions online and just with the metadata. So it's extremely easy to guess who is behind the transaction. So if you imagine that one day, like Web3 crypto is the thing you use to buy your bread, everybody will know who you are, and that's something you definitively don't want. So it's important to hide the data themselves, but also the metadata. By metadata, you mean your IP. Even if we don't know what you are transacting, if you know that I am transacting with Evin, it's a bad idea. So you want to hide all of that. The world is not like as nice as we think, and like all public is not good for privacy. It's good for some kind of transactions, like typically OpenGov, it's perfect to be public. But for your day-to-day transaction, you don't want them to be public. If you think a bit about it or read around, you will see like it's much more dangerous than what we think. And today, like we can tell whatever we want with banks, but they are pretty good at keeping the data to themselves. So I agree with my colleague, all of that needs to be private.
Chi, anything to add?
Yeah, there's maybe just to also give a concrete example. Earlier last year, Google launched the A2A protocol. The protocol, in the protocol, there's a lot of definition, including the agent card, which essentially is a list of information that agents they think the agent belongs to. That will give people information about what the agent is for, and who developed this agent, and a bunch of relevant information. So there's some protocol that designed for agent identity are thinking about putting all those data on chain. And to us, we disagree on that because we think part of those information is very private to the agent developers or like the companies, and very much agree with all the other panelists mentioned. Some of the information, particularly, you want to keep it private, and then there's two ways to keep it private. One is that you keep it, you mask that on chain, and so it stays on chain, but people cannot see it. You can just verify it, or you completely keep that off chain. So particularly to our design, we keep some of this information off chain. We only keep the information we think that's absolutely is needed to verify something. So it can be verifiable but private to on chain, but minimize the information or like the data or volume keep on chain, because nowadays we think on chain data is still a lot more expensive in terms of storage when it comes to keep that off chain. So yeah.
I think we can all agree we live in an attention economy. And imagine a headline 10 years from now. Mass identity event shakes trust in AI agents. What kind of failure, technical, governance, or social, worries each of you most?
Governance keeps me up at night. I think that from a design perspective, we are all compelled to build in meaningful controls. I think that weak revocation or the inability to halt an agent mid-process, I think that is a potential disaster. As we've seen from Obsidian Security, more than 91% of agents are overprivileged in terms of the access that they have, the rights and capabilities for initiating transactions, interacting with data, sharing, et cetera. And so I know that DAO season may be over, but governance is always in style.
Maybe I'll add something here. So to us, we think actually governance is becoming even more important than payment at the moment when it comes to agent adoption among mainstream companies we work with. Because nowadays, if you, like as Evin mentioned, probably heard a lot about agentic commerce, agentic payment. Everybody's claiming that we're doing something related to agent payment. By the way, that is not about only Web3. Okay, it's every single Web2 fintech companies. You can imagine like every single fintech companies who have a card are claiming that they're launching an agent card soon or later. And in that case, actually what really make it challenging then for a company to adopt that is how can I have the right, again, governance and control to the agent and tons of like horror stories you probably already heard of. Like the head of super intelligence lab from Meta, who is in charge of like the agent safety, got all his email being deleted by the OpenCloud bot. He deployed on his personal laptop.
So my question was that real or was that just clickbait?
What? It's a real?
Was it real or was it clickbait?
Yeah, it's real. It's real. And actually, we actually heard so many like similar stories. Not that bad, not go that far, but kind of like similar out of control, like losing control to their agent when it comes to like even some internal workflow. Because among enterprises, there's so many like different access control you're assigning to different groups of people. And by the way, another horror story you can imagine of is if agents are actually the majority of developers in your company in the future who are managing your code base, managing all the APIs and access and everything. Nowadays, actually what makes people worried about is you give your API key, for example, to an agent that is not like having a time-based window or like a session-based, like a delegation limit to that, then you don't know what's going to happen to that. So the practice they do actually is they rotate the API across, like every single month for some of the financial institutions we talk to. But the problem is whenever you rotate that, sometimes you don't know then what agent will have those API key, then that will break the agent workflow. So it's so much a disaster right now. So.
Yeah. And I think this.
Yeah, one of the possible solutions is to keep the accountability clear. Today, when I buy something, I have someone to turn to if it doesn't work. I can talk to Amazon or I can talk to Visa. When I delegate to my agent, it's my agent, I am responsible for it. But this agent is talking to another one, talking to another one. And if these things are decentralized, running in a blockchain, nobody will be accountable for it. It will be the code decided to do whatever. And on top of that, it's not fully deterministic. Huh? Like LLM, especially today, they are kind of like doing the right thing most of the time, but not often. So we need to keep the accountability. You still need to, you want to have someone you can talk to that will answer to you so you can get your money back. Because today it's not the case. I think people are playing with agents because it's fun, but OpenClaw was launched like without any kind of security, and that's a disaster. All the people I know and love, like, they don't really understand this aspect of security. Like, they are waiting to get burned before they realize they need some control into the system. And today I see the same thing. Like, everybody is building like crazy because it's so fun to build it, but nobody is thinking, how we like control this thing?
So I think that's probably a perfect segue. I know we've got 20 seconds left, so I'll just bear with us an extra minute. As agents really start to act on our behalf, if it's signing transactions, paying for things, voting, coordinating, what's one right you believe every human should retain that no agent should ever be allowed to override? Maybe one sentence from each.
I'll name something that's certainly in the news. I want human beings in charge of weapon systems.
Okay, so weapon systems, no AI agents. Chi, Evin, Pierre? One thing that agents should not be allowed to take control over, that we need human.
At the end of the day, what I believe is irrelevant. I think we will go full speed into it, and everybody will build agent for everything, and we will pay the consequences later. That's what I think will happen.
So you think we're not going to heed some of the advice that we've heard from experts?
I don't think so.
Fair. Evin?
I mean, this feels very obvious to say, but I think the shutdown protocol definition and kill switch, like we should not, as humans, delegate the ability to halt agents. And so that, as a design principle, as Pierre was noting, is often absent for many of these interesting novelties.
Chi?
Similar to what they say. I think we should not allow agent to really go into autonomous world, which, by the way, I really hope we can get there, but without the very switch button, kill button to how the agent will behave and access your stuff.
We need to control that kill switch.
Yes.
Guys, I want to thank everyone here today. Please, big round of applause for our panelists.